Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today I want to quickly tell you about what I've been up to in the past few days and an insight that I've gleaned from this little chunk of time. But this comes in the context of the past several weeks. I suppose the past month or so at least. Of having been in pain, discomfort or ill for one reason or another. So starting just before Christmas with our poor little dog, Indy, and his dementia. He had a real bad dip over the Christmas New Year period, didn't know night from day, was panting, was scratching, was deeply confused and distressed, which meant I was getting 2 or 3 hours sleep per night throughout that time. And then that coincided just as he was coming out of his dip, and now he's on a nice plateau actually of sleeping fairly regularly, with a filling on my first premolar breaking, or finally giving up the ghost after a couple of years in place, hard service as it were. That broke, exposing a nerve just before Christmas, which meant I had to go and have a temporary filling that promptly cracked just before New Year's or New Year's Eve. I had to have it, essentially the first stages of root canal done to fully open up the tooth and put a filling in there and a little layer separating the nerve from the outside world. Which so far so good is holding. When I chew chewing gum, I really feel it, so I think there must be something about the vacuum created with the gum on the tooth that sort of sucks on the filling, I don't know. But that's going to be a full root canal at the end of this month. And then, of course, both me and my lovely wife, who's currently dozing upstairs, have both had an awful cold. This morning, actually, I have cold sweats. And that's been for the past 2.5 weeks, perhaps. And interestingly, our friend Ruth has had a very similar cold, which brings with it nausea, earache, migraine, jaw ache, but the jaw ache might just be mainly because of my aforementioned tooth that needs finally fixing. And also, again, an inability to regulate body temperature. So hence the cold sweats, but also through the night you can't get much sleep. And she had it, and it lasted for her for 5 weeks. So we're about maybe halfway through that. I really hope it can go away before then. But anyway, before this becomes a sort of slightly wide-eyed rant, in that context, in the past couple of weeks, I have been experimenting with making and doing little chores and tasks, and in particular in the past few days I really brought some plans together and started making a caddy for our milk deliveries. Now, milk deliveries aren't common in the UK. They haven't been common really since the early 90s really. But a local company is offering to drop off milk bottles and take away empties to refill, and this is a great way of saving on plastics, and it's also very convenient to have a pint of milk or two delivered every couple of days. And we wanted to make a little box, a caddy, that they could put them in, because birds and cats learn how to get into the milk, how to sort of smash through the metal lid or pop it off in some cases. So we thought we'll protect our deliveries of milk and eggs sometimes in a lovely box. And so I brought together some careful measurements and some scrap plywood from the work shed, along with I think a 1x2 chunk of wood for 4 feet to rest on, made an initial construction out of the plywood and tested it with some lovely cupboard magnets to hold the thing closed, just enough tension to stop a cat being able to open it, a lovely brass handled lid which had been coated with a weather resistant black paint, some nice hinges as well on the inside, and also some rubber feet for the bottom. I ordered those online, and all of that was coming together beautifully. In the past couple of days I've been painting 3 coats of white weather-resistant paint on the box itself and the feet, 3 coats of white on the lid plus 3 coats of mint green on the lid, and then a wonderful painstaking exercise of making a stencil in a font that says milk on top. Mrs. Soup chose the font primarily, and we discussed it and came to that conclusion together. And I set up this stencil really carefully, weighed it down with washers here and there, sprayed it with the appropriate delicate sort of misting, and then a slightly denser coat, only to turn my back and have a raven. It had black beak. It was quite a large bird. Come and land on the box and investigate what I was doing. And I was gutted, because it was such a careful exercise, and then to have to take off obviously shoe the bird, then take off the stencil to see the damage. One of the washers fell off and sort of landed splat on the lid, and I was heartbroken, I have to say. But I went straight to work on it. I used some white spirit on the spray paint, because the mint green was water-based paint, so it wasn't too badly affected by the white spirit, and got rid of the worst of the damage. And then that night retouched it with some mint green and some chaos black from my Citadel paints collection, and it ended up looking quite good. And then yesterday morning I finally was able to give the whole thing a clear coat, and then, having clear coated it, give the whole thing a wash with some waterproofing treatments, like a PVA based white sort of milky liquid that dries and makes the whole thing hydrophobic, so rainwater won't collect on it. And it's all wonderfully made. It's been a great distraction for me, despite feeling a bit manky. And then this morning I woke up to find this. Yeah, the milkman completely ignored the box saying milk on it right outside the door, and so obviously we're going to have to put the box by the door and risk getting the occasional bird poop on it from the guttering above. Oh man, it was a great project. I really enjoyed making it. It was a wonderful little concept, and being able to use some of the scrap that we have from other projects to bring this together. But then to have gone to bed last night with, as my wife was saying, sort of sugar plum fairies dancing in my mind, sort of going, oh, he's going to love it, and he's going to come and go, oh, how wonderful, and drop off, take away the empties and drop off the new book. No, that didn't happen. No, and instead of finding that Santa had left me milk bottles in the box, instead I found that Santa hadn't even noticed my box outside the door. Oh well. But it was fun, and it was good, and obviously we're going to move it. Maybe we'll update delivery instructions with the company. It'll be fine. But that was fun. The past couple of days have also seen me experimenting with this. It's a glass stylus pen, which is essentially an ink dip pen, where ink can rest in the grooves at the top of the pen here, almost shaped to look like the bristles of a brush. And it's a beautiful drawing experience. The quantity of ink, so this image here was drawn with one dip of ink from a pot that actually from a set of ink that I've had since I was a teenager, but the pens that came with that set were rubbish, and so now I've merged those inks with this glass stylus to have a wonderful drawing experience. I really enjoyed the quality of the line, the quantity of ink that came off the pen, and the crucially that came off the pen in an orderly fashion. It didn't all just plop off onto the page, which I've heard bad versions of this sort of thing can do. And this was only £4.57, oddly enough. It must be a very mass-produced thing, but it's also quite beautiful as well. So that's been a real pleasure. And if you're interested, I have an Instagram that I'll put below, where once a week now I'm doing a doodle, mainly for the fun of it, partly as a sort of a mindfulness exercise, and also partly just to get back in the practice of really mark making with accuracy and knowing how to get from my mind to my hand to the paper in terms of artwork. So this thing was a real delight, and again, in terms of just making and bringing things together, very much enjoyed it. And it was these two making projects that meant that I was sitting down to do this at the sort of the of art crafting desk, when I noticed this tiny little clamp on the shelves next to the desk. Now, in a previous video I've talked about this area when I set it up. It's an old drawer divider that we've mounted to the wall where I keep my Citadel paints and some flock and glue and needle files and trim clippers, this kind of thing. And this tiny little clamp came with that. It was actually in it in the I think the shed when we first moved in the old shed that came with the house. And I liked it. It's a nice little clamp. One day I'm sure it'll be very, very useful for just the right thing to clamp. But having spent a few days focusing on making a box out of scraps and then working with my hand in the ink medium, I sat down and I just looked at this and I thought, I know exactly how that was made. It's strange that it never really jumped out at me before, and now looking at it I can't unsee it. But basically this is absolutely a homemade little clamp, again presumably for a very specific solution, where someone has taken a screw and presumably soldered or welded or silver soldered or tack welded or something, tag some sort of joining of metal has happened where a relatively thin gauge wire has been attached to the head of a screw. It's then promptly had its sides filed down to reduce its profile along the length of that wire, and then the screw has been introduced to this chunk of metal that's been fairly crudely actually bandsawed or something to get this concave space, the actual clamping area, out of this block of metal. There's been a hole drilled and that hole has been tapped so that this screw can make its way across the space in an orderly fashion as it's carefully screwed in. And in that sense, you can even see actually where this was on the end of a piece of metal, and it's been also bandsawed off a bar. So this was probably on a bar of metal and cut off, and then promptly cut out, and then drilled and tapped, and then it's amazing how making has revealed a little bit of someone else's making to me. It's sort of honed my seeing of the things that were in front of me, and I'm already quite good at seeing how things are made and done. It's an archaeological skill as much as anything else. But in this instance, for some reason, I just hadn't considered it. I hadn't really thought about what I was looking at. But the other day I sat down to do some ink drawing, maybe to cut out the stencil for milk, this kind of thing, with an X-Acto knife, with a scalpel blade. And I just looked over, saw this, and thought, yep, I know exactly how they made that. I know who made, well, not who made it, but I know what sort of maker made it. Someone who had a metal workshop, and I appreciate their craftsmanship. It's not the most amazing clamp, and I'm sure they would be the first to say it wasn't. But it is a clamp that clearly does the job, precisely the job that they needed it to do when they first made it, and I appreciate that. And there you go. That's what this whole video was leading to, I suppose, is that amidst the feverishness and the frustration, the simple act of sitting down and making something has revealed someone else's handiwork to me. Making and seeing, maybe making and understanding, comprehending, go hand in hand, and I very much appreciate that. Anyway guys, hopefully this has been remotely interesting to you. Thank you for watching, and next week I think I'll be talking to you about Lego and UV light, but we'll come back to that, I'm sure. Until then, do take care. Bye bye.